Hello, everybody. You're listening to Hot 1240, Hot News Talk Radio, Clutch with Keon Rose. Thank you for joining me today, making me just a small part of your day. You know that I appreciate all of you. A lot of things to talk about. The NBA had its first games. The opening game of Cleveland on the night that they received their championship rings. Also, the Golden State Warriors. A little bit of trouble in paradise. You had Kevin Durant, but you know what? Maybe just a little bit of trouble going on with the Warriors. If you were able to see the games, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, well, you're just going to have to sit back and wait for me to get there. Also, I have something to talk about with regards to the Heisman Trophy, right? The understandable front runner of the Heisman Trophy is Lamar Jackson. I don't think that that's particularly disputable or very debatable. Lamar Jackson is a monster, and he is, quite frankly, easily the best player in college football, if not the most valuable player to his team. And he gives them a chance to win games they have no business being in. Because when he doesn't play well, you see what happens to them, right? Like they get pushed around by Duke a little bit, a school that has no business hanging with them typically, except Duke is a solid defensive unit, and Lamar Jackson struggled, and the entire Louisville team struggled, just in general. But what happens on the other side of the ball? Because you have a lot of players for Alabama that you have to consider defensively. Now, Alabama's defense is an aberration. It is everything that defies nature. It's a defense that scores points. Alabama's defense defies all logic. It makes no sense. But here's the thing about defensive players. If a defense does its job really well, it's Alabama. If it does its job to the max that it can actually do its job, it scores points. But if a defense is just great, if a defense is just good, if a defensive player, especially those guys that are on the outside defensive backs, if those guys play at a high level, they don't generate any stats. You don't have defensive backs generating tackles if nobody wants to throw over there. They don't get interceptions if nobody wants to throw over there. The question is, with the Heisman Trophy, why do we have so few defensive players being recognized? Because it does seem to be a weird statistical quirk. When you have good defensive players, they're almost never recognized as easily. And I understand that there's some positions that are always going to be overlooked, right? The quarterback is going to win the Heisman most of the time. The play starts with him. It starts with the ball in his hands and goes on from there. And you've got all kinds of different quarterbacks who run, quarterbacks who throw, hybrids. So you've got different kinds of guys who are capable of controlling the game. What you have with running backs are also guys who have the ball a lot. Wide receivers don't get targeted as much, and receivers don't win the Heisman Trophy as often. But defensive players hardly ever win it at all. So I'd like to dig into that a little bit as well. You're listening to Hot 1240, Hot News Talk Radio, Clutch with Keon Rose. I think you should check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Because if you check us out on YouTube, you get to see what it is that I look like. I don't know what you think about my face. I don't care, but you get to see what it looks like, and you get to see what our studio looks like, a little view. season. I don't way, but I don't know any other way to do that. That's a team that's finishing the season. They're going to be bad. When you look at this team, there is no gel. There is no chemistry. The ball sticks in certain guys' hands. It's always been that way with Melo and D Rose. So why would you put them on a team together? You know what Jeff Hornacek is capable of, because Jeff Hornacek is a guy that when he took over the job in Utah, and in Phoenix, what he was able to do with that team in terms of getting them to pass the ball around, move the ball around, give that offense a sense of motion, a sense of ease. Yeah, none of that followed him to New York because he's got Ball Hog 1 and Ball Hog 2 on the same team. This is a fundamental problem that I don't think you're just going to fix. You're not going to put a little elbow grease on this one and get that one to go away. The Knicks are bad. And what everyone was hoping was that we would at least have one season where the Knicks weren't bad, because you know how I feel about certain teams in certain leagues. I feel like the NBA is better when the Knicks are good. I feel like the SEC is better when Tennessee is good. I feel like the NBA is better when the Knicks are good. I also feel like the NFL is better when, like, the Steelers are good and the Bears are good. And I don't know that neither of those things are true at this moment either. But there's certain teams in every league that they're a draw. They have a huge fan base. That fan base is passionate, whether the team wins or loses. And when that fan base gets rewarded, the entire sport looks and feels better. The SEC, to me, is a more watchable conference with a good Tennessee. Georgia, and I mean that up until recently in years, not this particular season, which you hope is the outlier in the beginning of Kirby Smart's career. But when the Knicks are good, I feel like the NBA is better. When we had Linsanity, was that not fun? I'm just saying. Was that not fun? That being said, the Knicks are bad. They're going to be bad. And that was one game. You had your eyes on that. You wanted to know how LeBron James, the Cleveland Cavaliers, were going to respond. Were they going to come out flat after winning a title? No. The ball was moving around. The chemistry was there. Kevin Love looked like he was a part of the team. Things made sense. What misses here is when you're looking for an answer to what happened over on the West Coast. A game that I did not get to watch the entirety of live, had to go back and check it out later because, of course, those West Coast games are ridiculous. They start at 10:30 Eastern time. They don't finish till 1. Like, man, I got to wake up in the morning. What are you doing? So I'm trying to be out there and watch this game. And at the start of the game was close. It was back and forth. It was Kevin Durant with the Warriors. That looks nice. I mean, it looks weird. Kevin Durant in a Warriors jersey looks very strange. But the offense did not seem to struggle by having him in it, at least not initially. Because all of those guys on that team, they're efficient guys. That's an efficient team. Those are efficient shooters. None of these guys are volume shooters, right? Like, nobody needs 30 shots to score 25 points. Everybody here shoots very efficiently, very effectively, and it all works in that offense. It all began to click. It all made sense. And look, here's the thing that I worry about the most with the Warriors is that defense. Because offensively, it all clicked. Defensively, man, none of that stuff made any sense. Not 1 second of sense. Like, I'm a little confused by it, to be completely honest with you. But offensively, it all clicked together. But the Spurs looked fantastic. Like, it wasn't like Golden State, at least at first, looked terrible. They ended up losing by 29 points, okay? A blowout of epic proportions. I don't think that, again, there's anything to really worry about, and I think people want to go, oh, the sky is falling, the Warriors got blown out after adding Kevin Durant. But again, chemistry is a huge deal here. It's a gigantic thing. You cannot underestimate it. It needs to be accounted for. The Warriors clearly don't have any, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But even on a few offensive plays, which they didn't get punished for, but should be looked at as an issue that's coming up in the future, because the Warriors had some plays where they ran into each other on offense. They just couldn't find the spacing. Kevin Durant ran into Klay Thompson on a screen that I believe Klay was trying to set for him. Kevin Durant ended up knocking down the shot, but it doesn't matter because that's the kind of thing that happens when you don't have any chemistry in real action, okay? Because the Lakers were completely smoked by the Warriors in the preseason. The problem with trying to gain any analysis by this in the preseason is that it is the preseason. It doesn't matter at all. It doesn't matter. Everything that you did at your last job might help you get hired at your next job, but it's not going to keep you at this job. That's preseason. Preseason is just work you do on the side. It's just warm-ups. It's televised warm-ups. Okay? You can't learn anything from the preseason, really. You can learn some things, like what is this offense going to kind of look like? We learn that the offense has the potential to be truly devastating. The potential. This offense is not yet truly devastating. And the Spurs didn't necessarily stop them early on the defensive side of the ball. But what San Antonio was able to do offensively is ridiculous in terms of their ability to score the ball, move the ball around, get whatever shot they wanted on Golden State. If the Spurs wanted to attack the rim, guess what? They attacked the rim, threw down some nasty dunks. If they wanted threes, they took threes. They took whatever shot they wanted. And that seems strange because the Warriors were very highly regarded as an offensive team last year, and obviously so. But one of the underrated things about that team was how well they played defense, how well they stopped people from scoring. And it did not matter one bit. Not this night. Now, things are different, right? No Festus Ezeli, no Andrew Bogut. You lose a lot of size protecting the rim. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. You cannot rely on Zaza Pachulia to be your rim protector. It's not going to work. He's not good enough. And as a kind of defensive guys got to have a little nastiness in him. Just a little bit of that desire to hit somebody, hurt somebody. You can try and come to the rim, but I will knock you out before you get here. Andrew Bogut is a big, angry Australian man. He had that in spades. Zaza Pachulia looks nice, which is a problem. Zaza Pachulia looks kind at the rim. He's not really a rim stopper. He's not going to stop you from going. And there's a play that Zaza Pachulia just got completely baptized on. Simmons threw down the hammer on him. And by the way, where do the Spurs keep finding these people? The Spurs found, I forget his first name already, like Ryan Simmons or something. The Spurs draft these guys and pick up these guys in free agency that you've never heard of. That guy was like 6 for 6 from 3. Where do they keep finding these people? Because this is the NBA. This isn't college football. You can't recruit whoever you want. San Antonio, again and again and again, keeps finding random dudes that go out there and ball, and I don't know where it is that they find them. Where they make them in a factory? It's crazy to me. Just absolutely absurd. It's like they understand what it is that the league is trying to do. They go underneath their stadium where they have a factory and a lab set up and just pull some switches and levers, and out comes the next NBA player that they need. I don't understand how that works at all. But whatever it is, they continue to find magic. Kawhi Leonard, huge game, 35 points. The Spurs have changed this entire narrative because, again, you feel like at the beginning of NBA seasons, you know how they end. Like if the Warriors ended up playing Cleveland again for the 3rd straight year, by the way, who's really surprised? If Cleveland ends up playing San Antonio, who's really surprised? Right? In the national title game, if Clemson, let's say Clemson, ends up playing a team like Washington, you'd be thoroughly surprised. But also, it's very possible. In the NBA, you don't have that feeling of surprise. The Spurs could make it to the finals and you wouldn't be that surprised. But I think everyone penciled in the Warriors, and now you have to kind of go back on that with some eraser. You might want to have to sketch that one in a little bit. San Antonio might disrupt the whole system. That is, to me, because of the chemistry that they have, because they haven't rocked the boat, because they haven't changed a lot, because they have the same head coach. That head coach is Greg Popovich. That team, to me, is the best team in the Western Conference. And it's going to take the Warriors a little bit of time to get their sea legs. I think this is going to look a whole lot worse before it looks any better. And you remember what happened when LeBron James and them went down to Miami, and it was going to be not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6 championship rings. And then they started the season, and they were 12-8 to start. And everyone went, oh boy, the sky is falling. Because when you put together a team that everyone else perceives to be a super team, the wins just ought to come easy. Right? Like, we assume rich people have an easy time in life. Because if you just give somebody a lot of money, well, the wins just ought to come easy. But there's a whole lot of things that get complicated when you have a lot of money. Your taxes look different when you have a lot of money. Your expenses look different when you have a lot of money. And you look at guys like Donald Trump and other people who have taken their money and hidden it overseas and done all of these things with it. Why do you think that they do that? Because just because they're rich doesn't mean they have zero problems. You've got to do things with your money because your financial life looks a whole lot different from everybody else's. But everybody else assumes that your life is easy. You're looking at the Warriors and you're going, okay, you've got Steph Curry, you've got Klay Thompson, you've got Kevin Durant. You are richer than us. You've got Draymond Green. You're richer than us. Your life ought to be easy. But it's not. Things get more complicated when you add a lot of great players. Who's going to take shots? When you shoot a whole lot less, which means you've got to be a lot smarter with the ball. And Steph Curry, great basketball player, deserved his 2 MVPs, I believe. Turnover prone, though. Dude turns over the ball a lot. I mean, you're going to have to cut down on those things. Those things actually hurt you more when you have more superstars on a team. When you're rich, when you have more, your life is not necessarily easier. And I think that's where we've penciled in the Golden State Warriors. They were already great. They've gotten better. If you're already rich and you get richer, guess what happens? You move up a tax bracket and Uncle Sam wants his cut. Just because you have more doesn't make everything instantly better. You're listening to Hot 1240, Hot News Talk Radio. Clutch with Keon Rose. Thank you for joining me. We've got a lot of football to get to, and we will get to all of it. We'll also get to Game 2 of the World Series on tonight. Next, Clutch with Keon Rose, Hot 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
Cash, 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 and more cash. Rick Davis has the cash when you sell gold, silver, diamonds, rings, and jewelry. Sell Rick your precious metals today and lock in your price. Hey, Rick Davis will trade your cash for shiny, brilliant, and heavy gold. Gold cheaper now by $100 an ounce. Join the Rick Davis Silver Bonanza too. Price is so low, the Lone Ranger is bound to gallop in, Kimo Sabe.
Hey-ho, Silver, away!
The markets are changing, so buy now. Cash, 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 and more cash for your silver and gold, gold, gold. Rick Davis, 5301 Brainerd Road. That's 5301 Brainerd Road. Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. Oh, and cash, cash, cash. You know where it is. Hey-ho, silver, away!
You want more business. You want to increase your bottom line. You want to spend less on advertising, imaging your business, and general expenses. You need Trade Bank. Trade Bank of Chattanooga. Trade Bank. Call now to get access to nearly 400 local businesses. Trade Bank. Call 877-2202. 877-2202. Trade Bank. You want to increase your cash flow, your competitive edge, attract new customers, and build a loyal customer base. You need Trade Bank of Chattanooga. Call right now. 877-2202. When you join Trade Bank, you'll get the benefit of free advertising in our monthly magazine, tradebank.com, emails, and mailouts. Join Trade Bank now and receive your Trade Bank debit card with trade credits to spend any way you want with our wide variety of Trade Bank partners. For almost 30 years, Trade Bank has been your voice for small business, a member of the American Bankers Association, and in good standing with you. Trade Bank of Chattanooga. Call now for a free consultation, 877-2202. That's 877-2202. Trade Bank of Chattanooga.
Expect mostly clear skies to continue through your nighttime hours. Cool again overnight, lows mid and upper 40s. For Tuesday, another warm, dry day. Lots of sunshine, highs into the upper 70s. Still looking dry and warm for Wednesday as well, highs near 77. America seems to be unraveling at a rapid pace. Dr. Ron Phillips pulls back the curtain and exposes those who are pulling the strings in his explosive book, The Unraveling of America, available now at Amazon or onphillips.org. And I'm Storm Team 12's Chief Meteorologist, Badger Report. On AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Hot 1240 Hot News Talk Radio with your Hot News Now update. Another gang shooting in Chattanooga Tuesday morning with a gang member shot in the arm, according to police. The one witness, Tyree T. Corley, is also arrested as a validated gang member who had warrants out for his arrest. The victim taken into custody and dragged off to the hospital as well. The suspected car described as a blue Chevrolet Impala. DA Neil Pinkston making a surprise announcement last night, and a 52-year-old Christopher Jeffrey Johnson has been arrested in a cold 20 years old from 1997. Back then, police found two bodies of two bloodied men shot in the chest many times in their house on Rosemont Drive. And now, 19 years later, a suspect arrested. In a surprise decision, the Chattanooga City Council has turned down regulation on short-term vacation rentals in Chattanooga, possibly taking into consideration a Beacon Center lawsuit in Nashville, which has set precedent. Chip Henderson and Jerry Mitchell voted for the regulation. If it's going on in the Tennessee Valley, it's going on Hot 1240 Hot News Talk Radio.
Martin Truex Jr. is off the pace and he is headed to the pit lane. Elliott Powers around the outside. Michael McDowell pops the right front tire. Here's Martin Truex to the bottom. Blaney blocked him off too. Meanwhile, Chase Elliott went 4 wide on the back straightaway. They're side by side for the lead.
Hear it live on Chattanooga's official NASCAR radio station. Hot News Talk 1240. The voice of NASCAR.
Why can't Derek Barnett win a Heisman? Why not? Don't we all agree that he's good? Don't we all agree that he's really good? Don't we all agree that he is arguably one of the only like a handful of guys that you could talk about being the best defensive players in the nation? Is that not weird then, that when you think of guys who have a chance to win the Heisman, guys like Derek Barnett and Myles Garrett, their names don't even come up. Yet if you talk about athletically, if you talk about what they're capable of, some of the best young men in the nation in terms of knowing what it is that they do and doing it well. Right? You've got Jabril Peppers up in Michigan as well. I mean, you've got guys, defensively that are really good. And in order to win the Heisman, you basically have to be an offensive player. Jabril Peppers returns punts. Jabril Peppers plays a little offense because Harbaugh wants him to win the Heisman, and Harbaugh is doing what it takes, and there's nothing wrong with that. But Harbaugh shouldn't have to. And John Solomon wrote this great piece on CBSSports.com, and I completely buy into this opinion. Why is it that when you've got great defensive players, and the great defensive players all across the nation, and a guy that I've been a huge fan of from the very beginning at Tennessee, Derek Barnett, even as he creeps closer to Reggie White sack numbers, if you talk about a guy that's got a chance to win the Heisman, you can't find a person who's going to probably vote for him. But yet you would agree, if you had to narrow down who are some of the best college football players in the nation, regardless of position, regardless of what they do on the field, wouldn't Derek Barnett's name come up? Wouldn't Myles Garrett's name come up? Of course it would. And you know why defensive players get overlooked as often as they do? They don't generate stats. They don't generate stats. There's not a stat for what they do. I mean, that's one of the things that you've got to love about baseball, and one of the things you've got to love about basketball. There's like stats for everything. Okay? Tons of stats. The deeper you go, you could get into advanced analytics, and there's advanced analytics for football too. But when it comes for those surface level stats, defensive players get interceptions, defensive players get fumbles and fumbles recovered, defensive players get sacks. That's it. And what makes it really hard is not every position is prone to doing one of those things, right? You're on the defensive line, you're not intercepting anything. You're a DB, you might cause some fumbles, but a linebacker might have a better opportunity at causing more fumbles than you do. If you're a safety, you've got an opportunity to do it all, but then your job takes you all over the field, so you probably don't end up excelling at any one thing. Right? Like, that's something that is to be thought about. Defensive players don't really generate the numbers that offensive players do. I mean, offensive players have yards, which is a number that is so quantifiable that we compare how many yards you've got to how many yards someone else in the history has ever had. And everybody knows, okay, this is the rushing leader for my school. This guy's the best guy that's ever rushed for my school. No one says this guy's the best guy that's ever sacked for my school. Your defensive stats just don't pop in that way. And we don't have enough stats for them. And by the way, offensive linemen too. Like, we're just never going to see an offensive lineman ever win a Heisman. But that's probably a rant for another day, because offensive linemen have even less stats than anybody else. How do you grade what it is that an offensive lineman does? Sure, you've got stat sites like Pro Football Focus where you could dig into the advanced stats. But Heisman voters don't really dig into advanced stats, though. Not really. Heisman voters don't particularly do that. And look, I'm not saying Derek Barnett should win the Heisman this year. Okay, it's very hard to argue against Lamar Jackson. He is incredible. The man has been electric all season long. I look at the rest of that Louisville schedule, and there's not a whole lot there that's stopping him. He could probably continue to be electric and be very fine. But when I have to look at who's going to win the Heisman, and you get to talk about Lamar Jackson as a possible guy, you look at the disappointments of the season, how Leonard Fournette, because he wasn't healthy early on, didn't necessarily get the opportunity to compete. I mean, you look at all of those things, And you just can't help but wonder, why is this so weird? Why is this so off-center? Defensive players don't get that much love. And you have to go back to a guy like Charles Woodson, who, like I said before, you've got to return punts, you've got to return kicks to even get that opportunity. Find a way to get the ball in your hands, which is crazy because as a defensive player, the ball's not going to be in your hands. And the ball not going anywhere is your goal as a defensive player. We've got a very high level of our love of offense. I mean, we've got a very, very intense affiliation with offense. Offense is what sells tickets, right? The old adage, offense sells tickets, defense wins championships. That while you can rely on a defense and rely on defensive players to get you what you need, because defense travels, because those kinds of plays are plays that you make regardless of temperature, regardless of weather, regardless of elevation. You always have defense. You don't always have offense. You have games where your running game is not necessarily working for you. You have games where the passing game is not working out for you, where your screens are not going. You have those kinds of games. You often don't have games where your defense just doesn't show up, where a defense that is good, that has good players, that has good chemistry, where a defense straight up doesn't show up. Doesn't happen nearly as often. So while we acknowledge the importance of defense, we won't give the award for the best player in college football to a defensive player, which is insane. There's nothing that works like that. Right? Many of you have begun voting and will vote for who you would like to be president. And you're going to vote based on a variety of factors that are important to you. I don't think we need to necessarily dig into the politics of it at this very moment. And whether or not a person is conservative or liberal or what have you, what you're basically saying is this person has merit, and so I can vote for them. Now, the law of the land is that a person has to be 35 years old for you to be able to vote for them for president. But you could vote for whomever you wanted. Heisman voters don't necessarily get that option when it comes to who they want to vote for, because when you look down at a page to see what it was that Derek Barnett did this season, while the sack numbers will look absolutely ridiculous, while the tackles will also look absolutely ridiculous, that's all you've got. That's all you've got. You've got his sack totals and his tackles. And we don't have anything extra for that. It's like if you were trying to figure out if a running back should win the Heisman, right? And you decided to grade this running back on the amount of carries that he had and the touchdowns that he scored. Maybe that means something, right? But the number of carries doesn't tell you how many yards he gained. Doesn't tell you anything. A tackle tells you that he got a tackle. It doesn't tell you that he lost 16 yards. And again, there is a tackle for loss stat, but we don't really ever look at it. And you're a defensive player, and you're like, how does that help me at all? You've got no real chance to be awarded as the best player in the game because you play on the side of the ball that's just not exciting to people. And quite frankly, I think we should hold our Heisman voters to a higher standard than that, because there's no rule that we have to legislate to make this happen. If Heisman voters wanted to dig into stats, if Heisman voters watched all the games with these candidates and said, you know what? Derek Barnett did his best to take over the game right now. And again, offensive players get an opportunity to put their signature on a game, even in a losing effort. And, it feels like a lot of times defensive players don't control the game nearly as much. But I'd like you to tell that to Myles Garrett. When Myles Garrett is healthy, he controls the game about as much as anybody else on that field. Yeah, the other 21 guys, a lot of their movement has to do with what Myles Garrett is doing. And what Myles Garrett is doing usually is making your quarterback run for his life. And if that's not something that's Heisman worthy, I don't know what is. You're listening to Hot 1240, Hot News Talk Radio, Clutch with Keon Rose. Make sure to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. I highly recommend checking us out on our website, Noogaradio.com, where we stream all of our shows, local and abroad. Hannity, The Herd with Colin Cowherd, and, of course, locally, this show, Clutch with Keon Rose, every day from 7 to 8, and the David Tulis Show, America's Morning News, Binary with Russell Stroud, Two Millennials Talk. The programming runs very deep with us, but you've got to go to Noogaradio.com to hear it, or the TuneIn Radio app, which is free for your mobile device. Simply search Hot News Talk Radio in the app, give us a favorite, press play. You'll have Hot News Talk Radio everywhere you go. So I've done a fair amount of NBA talk today. And I know that I was trying to pull back on it, but then I saw the Warriors got beat by 29 points. And you're like, wow. If you thought that the window for the Warriors to win was open forever, and then they added Kevin Durant, and it would be open for forever longer, didn't it look like it closed a little bit? Like, I'm not saying it shut. I'm saying it kind of did that thing that windows do sometimes where they're not necessarily in the frame properly, and then they drop a little bit. Didn't look good. It did not look good. But also, last night, another thing happened. The Cubbies played the Indians in the World Series. And let me tell you something about the Cubs. I told you yesterday, I think the Cubs got to win game one. I think it helps them. I think it gets some of the pressure off of them. The pressure of 112 years of losing gets the stink of that off them. Because look, in sports, there are different odors. And I'm not talking about actual odors that you can smell. Because, yes, obviously, they're different odors. I'm talking about the odors of losing. There's some stink that doesn't come off you, no matter what team you go to, no matter what place you go to. There's some stink that will always reside with you. Okay? That's just the nature of how this works. And then in some ways, there is some shine that also sticks to people as well. You come from a winning organization, and even though you may not have been the best player, you keep finding ways to stay winning, right? Like Tyler Hansborough went to North Carolina. When he got to the NBA, even though Tyler Hansborough has no discernible, real, obvious skill that he uses to play basketball, Tyler Hansborough's still out here in the league, getting paychecks from somebody. Last I checked was Toronto, but I don't even know where he is now. The point is, Tyler Hansborough bouncing around the NBA, continuing to be a piece of somebody's basketball team because he came from a place that was a winning environment. And the reverse can also be true. Some could argue that Jay Cutler and Vandy, and I have some friends who are going to be very mad at this analogy, but listen to me. Vanderbilt, not known for its winning football ways. Jay Cutler got the Vandy smell on him. And everywhere he goes in the NFL, is Jay Cutler still in the NFL? Yes. But somehow, we keep wondering if Jay Cutler's a good quarterback or not. He's a starting quarterback, and he's the only starting quarterback, to my knowledge, that we're like, is that guy really good at football? We're not sure. Right? It's different from Romo. When you're positive that Romo is good, you believe he's good. When you're positive that Romo is bad, you believe he's bad. With Jay Cutler, you're always in that gray, ambiguous area. Just, is he actually good at this thing? Because I don't know why they pay him to keep doing that. You just can't get the smell of losing off of you just because you left. Just because you add Joe Madden and you've got a great bullpen and fantastic pitching and you're the Cubs doesn't mean that there isn't the smell of 112 years of losing hanging all over you. All over you. Like a ghost. Just sitting on top of you. Like a cloud. You ever read Peanuts? Charlie Brown? And then there was the one kid that always showed up to Charlie Brown's house, and made a mess of everything simply because he showed up. That kid's name was Pigpen, which is weird that he allowed people to call him that. But regardless, Pigpen was dirty. And Pigpen was so dirty that he just kind of had this cloud of dirt just around him. That's the Cubs. You've just got this stink of losing, and we're losers, and I'm a loser, just kind of hanging around you. Okay? That's just the nature of your organization. And simply because you added all of these fantastic and logically good baseball pieces doesn't mean that suddenly the stink of 112 years of losing disappears. It doesn't. It hangs around. It stays right there. It affects you. And when you lose game one, now the pressure mounts and the stink gets a little bit more pungent. It gets a little stronger. And now we all have to figure out what we're supposed to do now with the Chicago Cubs. Are the Chicago Cubs seriously going to sit around here and get swept in a World Series? Because that would be the most Cubs thing that could happen. And that stink of 112 years would become the stink of 113. And the reason why I'm talking like this is not because the Cubs lost, because people lose in the World Series. It was how they lost. They got completely dominated in basically every phase of the game. They were outpitched, they were out-hit, they were outfielded. Errors were happening all over the place. It's not a great situation with the Cubs. The way that they played last night, they can't come out and do that again. I'll tell you that right now. You come out here and do that a second time, yeah, I don't know that you're winning this particular World Series. And I understand that baseball gets all topsy-turvy, and baseball and hockey are the two sports where just because you've got 7 games doesn't necessarily mean anything. Like football, we all know that a lot of those games could go either way. It's so hard to win a Super Bowl. But baseball, you just have series that turn on a dime. You're up 2-0, you'll lose the series. You could be the Yankees in 2004. You're up 3-0, you'll lose the series. Gone in the blink of an eye. That's baseball. So I get it. I'm not giving the World Series to the Indians. I'm just saying the Indians have the stink of 49 years of losing, 48 years of losing. And if you multiplied that by 2, the Cubs still have you beat by a very large margin. Like if the Indians were 2 times the losers that they are now, they would still not be as losing as the Cubs are. And that means something. I don't care what anybody says. The history of the team matters. Not necessarily from the standpoint of the curse per se, but from the standpoint of the fans show up to these games and you can feel the pressure on you. You can feel it. The media applies pressure. And we do this all the time in the media because we love it, right? Let's see what's happening down in Dallas with Dak Prescott and Tony Romo. That's not happening on accident. That's the media loving to fuel fires and adding pressure where there is no pressure. Look at what's happening with Odell Beckham Jr. and the Giants. The media, we add pressure where there is no pressure. Look at what's happening with the Cubs. Pressure where there is not necessarily pressure. I think if this were just any old series, I think the safe bet would be picking the Cubs. To me, it's clearly not. And it's not because they're not well managed. Joe Madden, great manager. It's not because they're not necessarily great at pitching, because Kyle Hendricks got himself tore up yesterday. He's a great pitcher. You know what I mean? They've got everything you need to win a World Series. They're just the Cubs. Period. You're listening to Hot 1240, Hot News Talk Radio, Clutch with Keon Rose. And I'm not going to lie, I used to be a huge NFL guy. In fact, I would say that I still am. I'm a diehard Redskins fan. I watch them disappoint me on a weekly basis. And I've grown accustomed to that being part of my tradition, right? Which, by the way, they play a morning game this week, which is bizarre. But anyhow, I'm starting to lean more towards college, albeit that I root for the Longhorns, and the Longhorns disappoint me on a weekly basis as well. But one of the things that I like about college is it doesn't feel like the college game is getting worse. It feels like the NFL games are getting worse. It feels like nobody's actually good. Like you've got the same 6 teams that you've always thought were good. They're still around, right? The Patriots, the Steelers when they're healthy, the Seahawks lately. That list keeps getting shorter, actually. I'm finding that 6 teams might actually be tough to come up with of teams that you actually believe are good. Because you can't even add the Panthers to that list. You really can't add the Falcons. I can't trust them to that list. So I don't know where you go with that necessarily. But regardless, it feels like the game's getting worse all the time. Especially these Thursday night games. They're ridiculous and they're bad. But I don't feel like the quality of the game is higher. And I feel that way in college, that you still have these games that are just pure glory to watch. Pure glory to watch. It's even the games involving losing teams. Like if you're an Ole Miss fan and this season is not going the way that you'd hoped, and it certainly isn't going at all in the way that you'd hoped, it's okay because what you're watching are at least still decently quality games because you've got a high-powered offense. And what ends up happening is when you run into another high-powered offense, you tend to have a shootout. I mean, not against Auburn. Auburn laid the beat down on you. But that's not because the game was bad. Just Ole Miss was bad. The NFL is having to deal with some stinkers. And this 6-6 tie that happened on Sunday Night Football that I never got around to talking about, the Seahawks and the Cardinals, that's supposed to be a good game. And it's not. It's just not. One team has the ball for 47 minutes, which is a problem in and of itself, and then only manages to score 6 points in the 47 minutes that they had the ball. Like games ending in a tie should be the ultimate indicator when you have 2 good teams against each other that the league is not quite where it ought to be. College football is kind of rising to the top here because the NFL just thought they were just going to march out football and everyone was going to like it. You're listening to Hot 1240, Hot News Talk Radio, Clutch with Keon Rose. Remember, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. Stay clutch. I'll see you in 24 hours, but stick around. Alex Jones is next.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
I'm blowing everything up. We're starting over. I'm doing the new show. I want guys who push